Okay, thank you, Sister Sadia. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. First, I hope that all of you are doing great. And as we did last time, what we're going to do this time as well, we're going to start with the recitation of the Quran that I think is relevant to our situation. Tonight's topic is coping in times of crises. And I'll have maybe a short talk. I'll try and shorten it maybe from last time so that I hope we allow for more questions and more discussion. But I'll have some few talking points around the topic of coping, and then we'll end at the end with a dua. So today, inshallah, if you want to follow, and I recommend that if you have a copy of the Quran or if you have a Quran app, you can open to Surah Ibrahim, which is Surah number 14. And the verses I'm going to recite this time, they're not going to be as many, but I'm going to start with verse number 32 and read to verse 34. Okay, so I'll give you a minute or so or less to hopefully fetch your copy of the Quran if you want to follow with me. Great, thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and get started. So if you want, it's already printed in the message box. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وأنزل من السماء ماء فأخرج به من الثمرات رزقا لكم وسخر لكم الفلك لتجري في البحر بأمره وسخر لكم الأنهار وسخر لكم الشمس والقمر دائبين وسخر لكم الليل والنهار وآتاكم من كل ما سألتموه وإن تعدوا نعمة الله لا تحصوها إن الإنسان لظلوم كفار. So those verses I thought were very adequate to tonight's topic. Since we're talking about the topic of coping with a crisis. Now, if you read these ayat, directly, they're not talking about coping. They're talking about gratitude. But since developing a sense of gratitude is so important to coping with a crisis, this is why I chose these verses. Now, initially, we may not see the direct link between a crisis and having to deal with a crisis and being grateful and thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but actually it is very connected to it. And the reason is because whenever we have gratitude, automatically we develop a sense of optimism and we have positive thinking when we are looking around and thinking of the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us, thinking of the blessings that we have in our lives. This automatically will spark this positive mood. So if you read these ayat, actually it's really interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not talk about gratitude in the beginning. Rather, he reminds us of a multitude of bounties we have that he has bestowed upon us. So, for example, he talks about the creation of the heavens and earth and the fact that he had allowed the sky to have rain, or he had let the rain down from the sky. and that he had allowed the fruits and the vegetation to sprout, and that is out of provision for us. So you notice in each and every sentence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that this is for our benefit, this is for us. In fact, he uses the word sakhara, which is to subjugate or to employ, if you will. So he had employed all of these things for our sake. So it says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الْفُلْكَ لِتَجْرِيَ فِي الْبَحْرِ بِأَمْرِهِ, for example. One of the things he employed for us is the ships and the sea. And he also has employed the rivers. So it's fresh water and salt water. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ دَائِبًا, and he has also employed the sun and the moon running non-stop, meaning they always rotate and revolve. So they don't stop. He also subjugated for us the night and day, which creates time for us. And time, no doubt, is a great bounty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after this, and this is no doubt a glimpse, it's just a small sample of the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon us. Then he said, and he has given you from everything that you asked for. And this is something to remember. I know sometimes we tend to focus on the 5% or maybe even the 1% that is going bad for us. And this happens on a normal day. Everything's great, everything's going well, but there's one thing that bothers us. And that really stays on our mind and bothers us and annoys us to no end, even though it is very, very small. So here he says, and he has given you from everything that you asked for. And if you try to enumerate, if you try to count the bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you won't be able to account for it. You won't be able to count the number of bounties. And then at the end, the reminder to us, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَظَلُومٌ كَفَّارٌ, that indeed the human being is oppressive and he is also ungrateful. So here, kafar, which is an exaggerated form of kafir, by the way, it's used in a linguistic context. It means that someone is not able to thank God or be grateful, to feel gratefulness. And this happens to all of us, it happens to Muslims, non-Muslims, everybody. We go into moments of ungratefulness. We feel that what we have is not enough, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should have given us more, or that we deserve more, and that he gave somebody something he doesn't deserve, and we should have gotten that instead. All of that happens to us because we're humans. So the one thing I want to start with, as far as coping with crises and calamities and hardships and difficulties, is to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to have this sense of gratitude. And if we were doing it already, which I'm sure we were, we have to try and increase it as much as possible. So one of the ways that helps us become grateful is to think of the present moment, is to live in the present. That's really crucial, because once you start thinking about the future and how gloomy it can be, and you start thinking about the virus and it's going to get me, and I'm going to be sick and I'm going to die, or maybe a loved one will die, now you're not going to be able to appreciate the moments that you have now, today. Imagine if, for example, if you woke up in the morning and you walked outside and you took a breath of fresh air. Just that bounty that we take for granted, and we've taken for granted all our lives. And now that we are basically tested by this, the fact that there's the virus that affects our respiratory system, it affects the breathing, now it's a reminder for us how crucial, how important breathing is. And that we take it for granted. I mean, we might thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the food we eat, we might thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the jobs we have, but rarely we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the oxygen. Rarely we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the fresh breathing we can do outside. If you go outside, for example, in the morning, the fresh breath we can take in the morning. So why not do this? Go outside in the morning, even if you have few moments, and enjoy the morning and focus on the present. And don't let the future, which we don't know about, don't let the future ruin those moments. This is one of the best ways to become grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to live in the present moment. And as we say, the present is a present from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This actually is a segue to the next idea. These are just ideas I'm sharing with you today. And that is the topic or the idea of meditation. Now, meditation is definitely a way to cope with times of hardship. And now it's becoming very famous, very common among everybody, especially in the Western world, in different ways or different methods to describe it. People talk about awakening, talk about meditation and all of that. And the key point here is that to realize that before all of this, meditation is mentioned in the Quran. Meditation is an act of worship. I would say it's a forgotten act of worship. For example, when you read in the Quran about tadabbur, what is tadabbur? Tadabbur is to ponder, to contemplate, to think, to reflect. These are all parts of meditation. So remember that this is an act of worship when you do it. For example, you go outside and you think and you ponder about the creation of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran this over and over again. And he praised the people who would يَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. They reflect upon the act of creating the heavens and earth. In fact, he told us, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. It's an injunction, it's an order, just like the order to pray and fast. It's an order to walk on earth. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ. Not only that you walk on earth, but you ponder and see and study how the creation came about. Essentially, the Quran is encouraging us to think about the origins, to think about the origin of creation, whether it's the origin of the universe or the origin of life, and all what you see now as really important subjects of science, whether it is cosmology or biology. This is mentioned in the Quran. It's urging us, and it didn't say, well, I'll tell you all the story. He said, you go out, you seek it out, you investigate, and you find it out. So the Quran left it open for us. It didn't give us all the answers. Of course, we can do some of it now. I mean, anytime, like I say, you're working at home or you're staying at home, but alhamdulillah, most of us have at least a backyard, or you have something maybe in front of your house. Maybe there's a small park that you can get to. Any area where you could seek some maybe solitude and some time to think and ponder. And this is, like I said, really tied to gratitude, because when you have some alone time, you can think now about the bounties of God upon you. You can try and think about your past life and what you've done and how blessed you have been. And just to give you an idea, the Prophet ﷺ told us in a hadith, "Man asbaha mu'afan fi jasadih." Imagine this. I mean, again, because we take things for granted and we stockpile food for a year, maybe sometimes, or at least for a month or two, we forget about these realities. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, if you wake up in the morning, من أصبح معافا في جسده آمنا في سربه عنده قوت يومه فكأنما حيزت له الدنيا. He said, if you wake up in the morning and you have three things, and these things are very, very simple, we definitely take them for granted, at least in the past we have. He said, if we wake up in the morning and you are healthy in your body, again, forget about tomorrow. You got to live now, day by day. From now on, you have to live day by day. He said, if you wake up in the morning and you are healthy in your body, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't be sick before you're sick. Become ill before you are ill. Enjoy the moments of health. So he said, if you wake up in the morning, and notice in the hadith, the Prophet talks about one day only. He doesn't talk about, a month. He doesn't talk about a year. The granularity here is one day. So he said, if you wake up in the morning and you are healthy in your body, aminan fi sirbih, you are safe in your house. So again, this is a mention of a safe house. Now we all are in our houses, right? He said, you are safe in your house and you have food enough for a day. Again, remember, he's talking about a day here. Alhamdulillah, the majority of us have food enough for maybe 6 months. I don't know, depending how early you got to Costco or something. But if you have enough food for a day, he said, so these are the three things you look for every single day when you wake up, if you have these three basic commodities, then he said, it is as if you have acquired, you have made an acquisition of the entire world. Think about that. This is the kind of gratitude we're talking about here. And I hope and pray that almost all of us have this. So you don't have to say, well, I don't have, I mean, maybe some don't, but the vast majority of us do. And we have, and that's the trick here. That is the point. We have to do it before it's too late. Because there's a concept here in Islam is that once you are grateful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you. So you don't want to wait until you're deprived from a bounty and then you say, I want to be thankful. No, be thankful when you have the bounty so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, will keep it for you. And there's a promise in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful to me, if you are grateful to me, I will increase you. And this is why scholars have said, قَيِّدُ النِّعَمْ بِالشُّكْرِ. If you want to tie down the bounty, like you don't want it to escape from you, you want the bounty to be tied down so it does not escape from you, he said, or they said, do shukr. Do be thankful and say thanks. And in Islam we have different statements. You can say Alhamdulillah, you can say Ashukru Lillah, all types. It's a feeling also. It's not just a statement. Nowadays we're so attached to statements, but really the concept of gratitude starts here. Before it is a statement on the tongue, it is a feeling, it is an experience in the heart. So these are two ideas I wanted to share with you. Another important thing to keep in mind in times of hardship to help us cope with a difficult situation is to have hope. We cannot despair. Now, this is important because it is tied to Iman. By the way, all these, are tied to Iman. And again, sometimes we think Iman is just a form of faith or resolution or a type of belief in something, which is true. But Iman in Islam is much more than that. It's not only a belief. It's, like I said, it is an experience. It is a state or different states that you go through. So some of these states are a state of gratefulness. Another one would be a state of hope. So all of these are manazil, we call them. They are stations, and they are stations of Iman. So the next station, let's call it, is the station of hope. So in times of hardship and calamities and difficulties, we have to remain hopeful. Now, if it was just us, if it was just up to us, humans, we are so weak, yes, I would say lose hope. I would say despair. But because we believe in Allah, because we believe in God, this is the only reason we don't lose hope. We know a lot of acts of worship, in fact, whether we know it or not, relies on hope. Even the act of fasting. Inshallah, we all hope to live to Ramadan, to see Ramadan, right? You notice all the acts of worship in Ramadan are built on hope. For example, when the Prophet talked about fasting, he said, you fast out of what? You fast out of Iman and Ihtisab. So Iman is faith. Ihtisab is your hope that Allah will reward you. Because you go through a lot of hardship in Ramadan, right? You're fasting all day, it's really hot, it's, you're working or you're going to school, it's really hard. So you do need hope. And the hope here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not leave you alone. He will not leave you uncompensated. He will definitely compensate you. So you have to live on hope and you have to worship based on hope. So likewise here, the kind of hope you want to have in this situation is what we call husn al-dhan, is to have good thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah will not let you down. That's really important, that God will not let you down. This is the type of hope you want to have in a difficult situation like the situation we're going in. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the people who are disbelievers, one of the things he mentioned about them is that they think wrongly about God. يظنون بالله غير الحق ظن الجاهلية. They're thinking like the people before Islam, in pre-Islamic times. They had these ill thoughts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They had these ill thoughts of God, that He's not gonna support them, that He's not gonna help them, He's not gonna come to their aid. These are all like ill thoughts of Allah. And what you want to have is the opposite, which is a good thought that he's not going to let you down. Another really, really important station is the station of istighfar, which is to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now is the time to seek forgiveness from Allah. You probably realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in Surah Al-Anfal, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَأَنْتَ فِيهِمْ وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah was not to punish them while you live amongst them. He's addressing the Prophet ﷺ. But then he said, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ مُعَذِّبَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَسْتَغْفِرُونَ. And Allah would not punish them when they are seeking forgiveness. So as long as they seek forgiveness, Allah will not punish them. So as if this istighfar is holding the punishment. Now, whether you believe this is a punishment or not is a different story. I think we talked about it before. Whether you believe this particular disease or virus as a divine punishment is up to you. But the point is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold any kind of punishment in life. It could be something personal, we don't know. As long as you seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's really important to keep this on a regular basis, to keep seeking forgiveness, especially now if you have more time to sit down and think and ponder. If you have more time on your hand, not all of us have that. I know some people are super busy, but especially if you have more time on your hand, dedicate some time to seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dedicate some time to seek forgiveness from God. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ told us in times of trials and tribulations. And you could say, well, this is maybe the trials of a civil war. It doesn't matter. The Prophet ﷺ said in general, he said, one of the things you do in times of trials and tribulations, he said, وَلْيَسَعُكَ بَيْتُكَ وَلْتَبْكِ عَلَى خَطِئَتِكَ. Like, let your house be sufficient for you. SubhanAllah, as if the Prophet ﷺ is talking about our situation today. He said, let the house be sufficient for you. Like, don't be looking outside the house. The house is plenty if you think about it. I mean, think about the people who are in prison. Again, goes back to the station of gratefulness. I mean, inshallah, this will not take long. But think about people who've been incarcerated for years and they don't have any freedom. Maybe they get 1 hour in the day to go outside. You have all the hours of the day to go outside, to think about that. But the point is, here the Prophet ﷺ said, let the house be enough for you. And he said, وَلْتَبْكِ عَلَى خَطِئَتِكَ, and cry, weep on your sin. So the idea of istighfar is not necessarily to hold a masbaha, a rosary bead, and say, like this. And there's no, I mean, you're not thinking about the words. You're not thinking about the concept of istighfar. You don't have any remorse. That's not istighfar. This is just lip service. It's like, really lip service. Reality of istighfar, as it mentioned in the hadith, is to weep on your sin. It's a feeling, it is an experience in the heart. That will translate, yes, on the limbs, but it has to start in the heart. So crying or weeping on your sin, it means that you feel sorry for what you've done before. You feel remorse for the acts of injustice, oppression, whether that oppression is against yourself, against someone else, against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, any kind of oppression you have committed in your life. So this is, and this, you can tie that to pondering as well, reflection. So reflection doesn't just have to be on nature. It doesn't have to be on the creation of Allah. It could also be a reflection on your past, on your sins, on your life and how you're living your life. So I hope you see all these stations tying up together. Another important station, I hope you're counting now, we're 5. And inshallah, I think I have 1 or 2 more, and that's it. Like I said, I promised I won't take long, but I hope I don't break the promise. Now, patience, goes without saying. I cannot think of any quality that Islam praised and stressed more than patience. Again, Ramadan is coming, and it's coming close. You realize that the Prophet ﷺ tied Ramadan fasting and patience. And there's a hadith that says that fasting is half of patience. Fasting alone is like half of patience, and patience is half of iman. So, and he said also in a hadith narrated by Ali radiallahu anhu that patience to iman. So to understand the relationship between patience and faith, he said it's like the head to the body, right? So patience is like the head, and iman is the whole body. So you understand the position of the head to the body, right? No one can live without a head. Likewise, you cannot, he said, you cannot have iman without patience. There is no iman, there's no faith for the person who does not have any patience. So patience is not easy. It is something that we have to work on, we have to develop. Again, it is something that you augment, that you try and improve every single day. It doesn't just descend on you. It's not a revelation. It's something that you work on. And just realize that, as a prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, or he said, there's nothing that is a gift from God that is greater and wider than the gift of patience. لا عطاء خيرا أو أوسع من الصبر. It's the end of the hadith. I don't now remember the beginning of the hadith, but the end of the hadith he said, imagine that patience is like a gift, and there's no gift better than patience. There's no gift better than the gift of patience. So if we gain nothing out of this difficulty except to increase our patience a little bit, believe me, this is a great gift, and it's a great accomplishment. So I know we can lose our patience now, and I hear, some people are losing their temper, they're getting angry because, they're obviously, it's really, really stressful on ourselves, our bodies, our psyche, everything, right? And the fact that everybody is together all the time, so you have no break from each other, I know it is very tough. And this is why patience becomes even more important. Maybe the last thing I'll mention today is, and this actually helps us, although it is counterintuitive, it helps us cope with situations like that. And that is to think of the dire situation, or a situation that is harder than the situation we're in. And maybe the one that stands out is the concept or the situation of death. Now, in our tradition, there's a lot of mention of death, by the way. And I know a lot of us, especially today, we kind of evade or run away from the topic. We don't like to discuss it, and understandably so. Why you want to spoil the day, right? No one wants to talk about death because it is depressing. And it is not a coincidence that in Islam we are asked to go and participate in funerals. One of the reasons we do that is because we want to remember death. And one time, I think it was Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah, the Imam, the great Imam, who was witnessing a funeral, and they saw him weeping. And they asked him, like, aren't you supposed to be an Imam, and you're supposed to be patient, and you're not supposed to shed tears, and this is a short life? And he said, I'm not weeping because of that. He said, I'm weeping because I'm remembering myself, that one day I'll be in that position. So he took it as a time for remembrance. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ wants us to remember death, because it is so beneficial to think about death on a regular basis. And this is why he told us in the hadith, remember death a lot. He said this is an actual statement of the Prophet ﷺ. And I know this is, like I said, it's counterintuitive, it's defiant to everything we do, the way we raise even our moms and our dads, but mostly our moms, because we stick with them more and because they're more emotional. They really want to, even when there is a death, they don't want to mention it. There's, I don't know, some kind of superstition even from mentioning the word death in some cultures, maybe not all cultures. But this is not the tradition of our religion. Our religion actually encourages us to remember death on a regular basis. And that's because it will help us understand the reality of this life. Because Islam wants us to put things into perspective. It is not to scare us, but it wants us to put everything into perspective. And until we put death in the equation, we're not going to be able to put this life into perspective. We're going to be out of perspective. Wallahi, we're going to be totally confused and lost and at least delusional. This is why I think the Prophet emphasized the topic, and he mentioned it in many hadith. I don't have time now to mention all the hadith. Maybe I'll stop here, inshallah, for any questions or comments you might have. And I hope these few points, I think I mentioned about maybe 6 or so ideas that I hope and I pray that will help us cope in these hard times. And I know for some people, at least, they're very hard, especially people who are working in the hospitals. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I pray that Allah will give support, and He will aid these people, and support them in these dire times, and to reward them immensely for the sacrifice they're doing at this moment. So inshallah, now if you have any questions or comments, like I think Sister Sadia mentioned, either I think we will allow you to say the question if you wish, or you want to type it, please go ahead, and I'll give you maybe a couple of moments to do that. Jazakumullah khair wa iyyakum. I'm glad it was helpful, and I'm glad that you learned, alhamdulillah. Okay. So I need a little break. I'll give you time, inshallah, to type your question or to think through your comment.
Assalamu alaikum, Sk Anas. I think there is a question in the chat box that someone asked, do you have any tips on how to control your temper?
Well, I do. I mean, this is also one of the really, really difficult ones, because, I mean, to start with, some people might be genetically inclined to be more, to have hot temper, or to get angry faster. But that aside, the Prophet ﷺ has given us a few tips. And if you notice on all these tips, I want you to notice something, and that is very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ is inserting delays in our response. And we talk about this in psychology nowadays, right? Like the time between stimulus and response. And stimulus here is somebody making you angry, pretty much. Somebody saying something that angers you, and the time it takes for you to respond. So if you're able to delay this response, then you'll be able, in fact, to maybe at least take some of the anger away. Now, I want you to notice this when I mentioned some of these tips that the Prophet mentioned in some hadith, and in several hadith. So one of them, for example, said, if you get angry and you're standing, then sit down. So obviously now your attention is going somewhere else. Instead of like thinking of what you're going to say, now you're sitting down. You're changing your posture. You're changing your the position of your body. So that also would calm you down. Or if you are sitting, you lay down. That's even more. I mean, you cannot imagine. It's really hard to imagine like being too angry and laying down at the same time. He also told us to make wudu. Now, wudu is not just time taken to make the wudu, right? Which is again a good gap between stimulus and response, but also the cooling effect of water, right? And no doubt this also calm you down. Physically, psychologically, everything, because you could say you can associate anger with heat, right? This is why we say hot-tempered, right? So the opposite is true. If you try and cool yourself down, that will also help reduce the anger. I mean, these are a few tips. He also said you can seek refuge in God, in Allah, from Satan, because realize this is anger is from Satan. The source of anger is from Satan. Also, he said it, subhanAllah, in many ways, and that shows us how important this is to control the anger. For example, and this is a way to motivate us to stay away from anger. He said, ليس الشديد بالسرعة ولكن الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب. He said, The strong amongst you is not the one who can wrestle and beat someone up. And this is how we define a strong person. Someone who's able to wrestle and beat someone up. He said this is not the definition of strength. He said rather, strength is the ability to control your anger. So we see here that this is not something you do, but this is something to think about. It's a motive like, oh, I am strong because I'm able to control my anger. So these are a few tips from the Sunnah of the Prophet.
There's someone who wanted to ask a question, so we have unmuted you if you wanted to go ahead and ask your question, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Sk Anas. It's me, Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. How are you?
Ahmed from the Saturday halaqas that you used to have.
Yeah, yes, SNH.
Yeah.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. And I had a question to ask is, would your Saturday halaqas be still open, or is that still?
Yeah. So I had every intention to start a virtual Saturday night halaqa. I have been a bit busy, but inshallah, I intend to start next Saturday. And if you are on the Remind app, I will send it there to remind everybody. But since you're here, inshallah, we're gonna do, the problem is I don't even know what Isha time now. Usually we do it after Isha, right? Yeah. So if you are on the Remind app, I'll put the time there. I think it's gonna be around 8 o'clock, but I'll confirm that on the app, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Okay. Okay.
I think there's a few more questions, Sk Anas, on the chat box.
Okay.
There was one about as
you go ahead,
the 15th of Shaban. Do you have any recommendations on what we should do?
You know, I mean, and this is actually true for any act of worship. The acts of worship do not or are not affected by any particular phenomena in nature. You stay and you keep doing the same actions you were doing before, except actions that are congregational in nature. Obviously, those we cannot do anymore. So any action that we were doing in the mosque, in the masjid, those we don't do. But we could always do things that we could have done alone anyway. As far as the middle of Sha'ban, there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of talk about the middle of Sha'ban. There's an authentic hadith that says that Allah witnesses His servants on the night of the half of Sha'ban, on the night of the middle of Sha'ban. There's no specific action that is mentioned. Maybe there are other hadith that are not very strong that mention this action and that action. Just keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching us on that night more than other nights. And obviously He's watching us all the time, but in the hadith it says yattali', which means He's looking on us, looking upon us. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing that, we should reciprocate and do something as well. But it doesn't have to be anything specific. It could be reciting Quran, it could be praying tahajjud, night prayers, or any other act of worship. It could be dhikr, it could be, like I said, tadabbur, reflection and pondering. So any act of worship would suffice. There's nothing specific that you have to do, as far as I know. Okay, so there is a question in the Q&A. Let me see, make sure it's the first one. I saw 3. What are a few ways to make our iman stronger during this time besides praying daily prayers? So I am big on actions of the heart, because a lot of times we focus on actions of the limbs, like specific sets of rak'at or specific set of dhikr and on and on. But we have to realize, and this is said by several scholars like Imam Ibn Qayyim and other scholars, they have said that every act of worship starts in the heart and is based on the love of God. So, and this way you can magnify, you can multiply the act of worship when you think about that, when you are not just doing a lip service, when you're not just mimicking some act. Rather, you do it and you focus on the quality of the action, not just the quantity. By the way, when you read Surah Al-Mulk, we all, I mean, not all maybe, but many of us know Surah Al-Mulk. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the beginning of Surah Al-Mulk? He said, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. He said he created life and death to test us, who's amongst us the best in action. He didn't say the most in action, he said the best in action. So focus on the quality. And this is definitely the best way to improve or increase or boost our iman. Because when we do things and we repeat actions, but they're like you're in pilot mode, right? And you, you repeat like a parrot and you act like a machine, you're not going to get the benefit of the acts of worship. So I would say focus on the quality, not necessarily the quantity, or I want to get some fancy dua that no one has ever heard of. This is not, it's really simple, but we've got to do it. So my advice, and I think everything I mentioned today, it kind of goes to that effect. The fact that we focus on the quality and think about these acts of heart, really. I mean, whether it is gratitude or feeling remorse or reflection or patience or other things, you can think that you can see all of them are tied to the heart and tied to your state of being, your experience, right? So in my opinion, this is one of the best ways to improve our iman. What do you think about the bodies of Muslims who passed from the coronavirus being cremated? I know cremation is not Islamic, but due to the virus, is this the time when we should be forced to follow CDC guidelines for safety purposes? Yeah, this is a difficult one. Again, I usually refrain from questions that are medical in nature, because remember, some of these questions are not just religious. We really have to get maybe a committee where you have religious experts and medical experts. But hypothetically speaking, if it is proven beyond a doubt, or if it becomes a law, for example, that you have to do it this way because it is proven that any other way will transmit the virus, right? Then we have no option but to do it. Remember, some Muslims will die from fire. That's not going to take away from their reward. It's not going to take away from their position in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is a necessity. In times of necessity, you're allowed to eat pork. You're allowed to drink wine. If you're choking and the only glass you see in front of you is a glass of wine, you are allowed to drink it. This is the beauty of Islam. It's based on ease. So this question is contingent on the fact that there's no other way. Now, there might be some intermediate ways. For example, we might say, well, we cannot do a funeral the Islamic way in the sense that we cannot have people follow you, but at least we'll have one or two people do the burial, the Islamic burial. Maybe that's an intermediate. But if it gets to a point where there's no other way but cremation, then there's no harm on the deceased, inshallah. I don't know, is there any questions any spoken questions, or should I continue reading the...
Hello?
Yes.
It's Ahmed here again.
Hey, Ahmed.
And I was just asking, so basically, if you're in time of need, you can eat or drink whatever you want.
But there are conditions, so I did not go into a lot of details. So for example, let's say you're gonna die and you need food, like you're dying from hunger, and the only food you see in front of you is pork. In that case, you're allowed to eat pork, but you only eat the necessity. You can't say, well, I'm allowed to eat pork, so I'll have a full meal. No, you just eat enough not to die. So that's the other condition we have to keep in mind. Or for example, let's say you're choking and the only liquid you see in front of you is wine. So you're allowed to drink enough to get rid of the choke, or to swallow whatever is stuck. So you're only allowed as much until the necessity is over or is taken care of. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions? Let me check.
I think there's
Um,
another question. Someone raised their hand, so Brother Sohaib has unmuted them.
Okay, go ahead. Whoever it is, please go ahead.
Brother Shahid, you can go ahead and ask your question. You're unmuted. Maybe it's not working. If you wanted to go ahead and continue with the other Q&A, we can figure this out, inshallah.
Okay, let me see what we have. So I think some people are leaving questions in the Q&A, others are leaving it in the chat. Let me go to Q&A. I haven't gone there in a bit. Okay, so, well, there's a small one and that's easy to answer. How can we join the Remind app group? Well, I don't know if you have my number, you can send me your email. I can easily add you. There are different ways actually. If I had your number, I would have sent you a request to join. So let me know what you want. If somebody can think of a better way, some of you might maintain Remind apps, but these are the two ways I can think about. Either you send me your email or your number, I'll add you directly, or I will have to give you the Remind address, which I don't remember right now. Okay, at a time like this, what would be the first step to get closer with Allah? What actions should we do? Yeah. This is actually, this is a subject, I mean, the answer to this is kind of subjective. Each one of, there's no standard answer to all of this. The best way, and think of this, think of the concept of tawbah. Now, tawbah is very personal. Everybody does tawbah, differently, right? Based on what they've done in the past. The best thing we can do in this time is to think about what we've done before. Like maybe identify one action that you want to quit, and you want to quit for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because tawbah is based on 3 steps. The first step is social media. The first one is you quit. Whatever it is, you quit it. And second, you feel remorse, like you feel bad for it because of what you did. And third, you make a promise that you're not going to go back to it again. Now, yes, in the future, you might go to it again. That's a different story. But for the time being, for this moment, for the repentance to be proper, you have to have those 3 steps. So think of something you want to quit. It could be any, I mean, it could be any, it could be major sin, minor sin. Think of something like that and do it. And, do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To me, that's, I think, the best action we can do. Especially if it is a sin that is related to other people. And it could be any kind of sin. It could be minor. Maybe you were backbiting somebody. So the best action you can do, and believe me, this is better than all the voluntary prayers, all of voluntary fasting. Some people are fasting the month of Sha'ban. The Prophet told us these acts of sin, these sins could erase all these good acts. So do you really want to be doing good acts and then have them erased like that? So this is why we need to take care of that. So it could be something that you may not think is a big deal, but it is a big deal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To me, this is the best we can do. Any kind of injustice we are committing toward other people, that has to stop right away. And to me, again, this is much more important than praying in jama'ah. And I mean, all of that is important, don't take me wrong. But the problem is a lot of times we overlook these things. And we think that by praying, it's going to compensate, or it's going to overwrite, for example, it's going to overwrite those injustices, but it doesn't, because they're not related. One has to do with the relationship between you and Allah, and the other one has to do with a relationship between you and someone else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to forgive you if you pray to him while oppressing someone else. No, you have to take care of that situation as well. So in my opinion, this is one of the best things we can do. All right. I think the Q&A is filling up. So do you wanna read the questions, or do you want me to read them?
There's somebody raising their hands. Would it be okay if we unmuted them for that question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Nadia ask.
Go ahead, you can ask.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Louder.
I have a question. So, how should we deal with like family disputes, like between a child and a parent, like when it comes to disagreeing on certain things?
Yeah. I feel like Dr. Phil right now. I mean, these are questions that are really, well, I mean, I always say that it has to be a compromise, meaning that you have to meet in the middle. Sometimes it could be the parent who is maybe a bit, I don't want to say stubborn, but maybe strong on something. And also the kid might also be, or you could be a young, I don't like the word kid, I like young adults better. But you also might be strong on something as well. Like you really want to do it this way and only this way. And what we have to do, especially in these times, because fact is we see each other much more often, and we have to be willing to put up with each other, to be, forgiving, a bit more forgiving of each other. But also consider meeting in the middle. Like I'm willing to compromise a little bit, and maybe, so it has to happen from both ways, I think. I know this might sound a bit weak from a parent perspective, but I don't think so. I think a lot of times, because we're so idealistic as parents and we want the kid to be perfect, we kind of miss the point, and we end up accomplishing nothing, because the kid will totally disengage, and they're not even willing to talk, and the parent is frustrated. So I think it's better to maybe try and work a compromise. For example, if the kid, let's say, they're on video games 24/7, I would say the approach is not to take the game away from them. Rather, negotiate with your kid. And again, this might sound foreign to some of us, especially people from different cultures. They do not like the idea of negotiation with children, like negotiating with terrorists, right? You don't negotiate with them, right? But this is not true. It's good to negotiate with your kids and say, for example, no pain, no gain. You want the video game, you want the Xbox, you're going to have to do this for me. It could be a chore. It could be maybe finishing the homework, something like that, right? So now there's a negotiation, and this is a good skill to have anyways. It's a good skill to teach your kids anyway. So this is one idea. I don't know. I don't have all the time, but I think start with that and see what happens, inshallah. I think there was somebody else trying to ask the question at the same time, but if not, I'll continue reading. It's a quick one. Is the closing of Kaaba for Hajj a sign of the Day of Judgment? Well, inshallah, it won't be closed for Hajj. Inshallah, by then it'll be reopened. I know there are a lot of questions like that. I am a bit hesitant to specify and say that a particular event that happened today or is happening now matches a sign of the hour, unless it's very, very explicit. Now, having said that, there are things that happen at the day of, at the end of days that are much more dramatic than closing the Kaaba. I mean, eventually, the Kaaba as we know it will be destroyed. The Mus'haf, the copies of the Quran that we read, the letters will be taken away. So there are things that are very dramatic, but those will not happen like necessarily right now. I think those will happen right before the major signs, or right before the hour itself. So I'm not aware that people not making Hajj, I'm not aware that people not making Hajj itself is a sign, but there are other signs related to the Kaaba, yes.
Sheikh Anas, there's one time for one last question. There's somebody raising their hand, so we have unmuted them. So inshallah, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. And by the way, just to give me a second, I noticed few questions about Ramadan. So I want to answer everybody, but since we're out of time today, why not make the next halaqah, because we're doing every Sunday. So let's do the next halaqah, obviously with admin's approval. Let's make it about Ramadan. And that way I can tackle all the questions about Ramadan, like how do we do Ramadan in lockdown? What are recommendations for reading for the month of Ramadan and all of that. So since there are several questions like that, I will go ahead and maybe do the whole entire talk next time about the month of Ramadan. Go ahead, please.
You can ask your question, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Anas. I'm just about the question that's just referred to the parents with the child, how to deal with them. Are there any books, Islamic books, talks about that? What your recommendation would be for us to read these type of books? Jazakallah khair.
Wa iyyakum. I recognize your voice, Jazakallah khair, Brother Ali. Wallahi, to be honest, and maybe this is something I've been doing maybe the last few years, I would say this is a book of life. The experience of life is more valuable than any book you can get. I want to acknowledge that we are very thin when it comes to books like that written by reliable Muslim scholars, like in a modern way, unfortunately. But in this matter, let's remember that you don't necessarily need an Islamic book. There are lots and lots of books about raising children and really good advice. Now, obviously, you could say that some of that may not be coherent with Islamic teaching. True, but this is the job of the parent. So you as a parent, for example, let's say you buy a book about raising children and you have books for all ages. You're going to be the filter. So let's say you get the book, you buy the book and you read it and then use whatever is beneficial. But this is my experience that I found several books that are not written by Muslims, or they're not written with an Islamic perspective, but they contain a lot of good advice. But wallahi, also if you just look at the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, I keep saying this, that a lot of the books that are written recently, like as late as maybe 20, 30 years ago by Muslim scholars, or not even Muslim scholars, maybe Muslims or Muslim thinkers, they kind of go out of date so quickly, but the Sunnah never goes out of date. So there's lots and lots of bits and pieces of advice in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But the best to me is, again, to end on a practical note, if we live according to Islam, this is the best way to raise our kids. And sometimes it's very simple. You get a lot of questions about, for example, how can I make my kid like the Quran? And I'm thinking, like, the best way is for you to like the Quran. Do you even like the Quran? And I really mean it. I don't mean like, I take the Mus'haf and I kiss it, right? That's great. You do that, fine. And if the kid sees you, he'll do the same. But the question is, do you really live by the Quran? So why do you expect your kid to memorize the Quran and become a hafiz and become a reciter and become an alim and all of that, and you have not done the minimum? So to me, certain things are very simple. And parenting, first and foremost, is role modeling, really, more than anything else. But like I said, as far as a book written by a Muslim, I think there were some books. I'm trying to remember. He's a brother who lives in our community. He gave me a couple of books a long time ago, but I don't remember the names now. And I don't even remember the name of the brother. So, but if I remember, I'll let you know, inshallah. But yeah, top of my head, I don't remember, specific names. Sorry.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Anas, for the beautiful reminders and for the practical advice. So inshallah, we can go ahead and do the dua if you are ready.
Okay, inshallah. I don't know if the admins, do you guys want to take maybe the questions we were not able to answer? Maybe send them to me. Maybe we could also address next time. Other than the Ramadan questions, if there were other questions, up to you, but maybe an idea.
Inshallah. We can send them to you, Sk Anas, if you wanted to address them next time. So we'll definitely, yeah, inshallah.
Maybe I'll learn to make my talk a little shorter, inshallah.
Jazakallah.
Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. اللهم اجعل أعمالنا كلها صالحة واجعلها لوجهك خالصة ولا تجعل لأحد فيها شيئا. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all our actions righteous. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make it sincere for your face. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not let any of it go to anyone else. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. We invoke the name of God, the name of Allah, the name of our Lord, with which nothing can harm us, inshallah. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. اللهم إنا نسألك العافية. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well-being. We ask you health and safety. اللهم إنا نسألك العافية في ديننا ودنيانا وأهلنا وأموالنا. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala well-being and safety in ourselves, our families, our wealth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from in front of us, from behind us, from our right, our left, from above us, and from beneath us. Ameen, ameen. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for listening. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all of you, and that He will enable all of us to act upon what we say. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you.